Uh, YouTube, are you ready for what I've been up to recently? If you're not, doesn't matter. I'm talking anyways. You can just close the video. Anyways, if you hear some bird chirping and some weird animal noises coming in, uh, on the weekend, I discovered that Fuzz enjoys watching cat TV on YouTube. So she's down there staring at the TV screen in bewilderment right now. So it's kind of hilarious, actually. So, anyways, that's what that noise is. But I can't deny my little fuzzy fuzzball, her moment of joy right now. So, but for this round, mostly books. We got 4 books and 1 video game to go through. So let's begin with the books as usual. First up, published in 2003, I believe it was, The Hardy Boys Exist to Inspire. So this is the story of the Hardy Boys tag team from the WWE back during the Attitude Era in the late 90s, early 2000s kind of thing. So Matt and Jeff Hardy were born in, I can't remember the name of the town, but North Carolina. And they had an interesting upbringing. Their father owned a large property that was like a tobacco farm, and the boys helped him out with that. They played sports, they rode dirt bikes. They really didn't see anything on TV up until maybe they left for college, I think they said, because they didn't have cable TV, so the only thing they had was like whatever came in via the antenna or something like that. So they were exposed to wrestling when it came on the TV on like Saturday nights or whatever it was. So they were aware of wrestling and they had a great appreciation for it, but they had a real kind of sheltered upbringing, really, like just out in the woods, doing what boys do with really not much of the outside world kind of pressing in on them, right? It actually seems kind of refreshing. It seems more like an 80s upbringing, kind of than anything. And they did, their father was a fair man, but also a hard man sort of thing, but they loved their dad. They helped him on the farm and stuff. Their mom died early when they were younger from cancer. So that caused kind of the first seeds of what the hell is life all about sort of thing, right? So as the boys got older, they eventually got interested in wrestling, and they would build a makeshift ring in their yard and have friends over, and they started their own amateur wrestling league where they were beating on each other, and this is kind of when they were learning, unofficially learning themselves, self-teaching how to be wrestlers, right? Eventually they gained a bit of notoriety, and they were doing fairgrounds and stuff like that and putting on shows, and they eventually started their own amateur wrestling league called the Omega League. And it actually, Matt was, Jeff was the flashy one with the more acrobatic moves, whereas Matt was the more ground and pound guy who also put most of the brain work and the behind the scenes stuff into making sure everything was successful sort of thing, right? So this Omega League eventually got them noticed, and they eventually started doing some spots for WWE, coming in as jobbers, right? And if you don't know what a jobber is basically a career wrestler that wins very few matches. He's there to make whoever he's wrestling look good and put that guy over with the crowd and put in a convincing kind of effort, right? Sort of thing. So they eventually started, they first started doing that, but then eventually people started to see the potential of these guys, right? And they started to actually become more featured characters. And then eventually WWE reached out, offered them a contract. They said, oh, fuck yeah. And that's when their WWE career began. And they talk a lot about when they first started wrestling, like I said, they were self-taught. So when they went, I can't remember what it was, if it was a WWE event or a training school or something, but they went to do some basic locks and holds in the ring, and the guy was like, what are you doing going to my right side? You always go left side first. They didn't know that. And I didn't know that either, because I'm not a wrestler, even though I watch a ton of wrestling. I never would have put that together, right? But there's these kind of rules and methods for doing these moves and holds and whatever that are just universally known to train wrestlers. And these guys just didn't know that because they never had any official training. So although they had all this potential and WWE recognized that, they were still fairly naive in certain aspects of what it was like to be a professional, or what went into being a professional wrestler, right? So, but as they got into WWE and they went through some training camps before they actually got on the main roster and started being on TV and all that stuff, they had to learn all this stuff. And they talk about some of the relationships they formed. And the biggest one was with Edge and Christian, who also were at some of these camps that they trained with. And if you know the Attitude Era history, you'll know that Edge and Christian and the Hardy Boys were very important to each other as tag teams, because they had some of the greatest matches ever, and invented the whole tables, ladders, chairs matches that they performed in so amazingly, with the beatdowns they took and the moves that they pulled off. It's just insane. Like high flying, danger, huge hits, like just savagery in the ring with these guys. You know, they're not especially big guys, but they wrestle like they're big guys, right? With some of the daring shit that they do, right? So I loved watching these guys. They're one of my favorite tag teams ever. And then eventually, so they go over a lot of the years through that time frame, late 90s into early 2000s, in the various events, what happened at them, the rivalries, whatever. And they talk about some of the behind the scenes stuff. Like one of the most interesting ones I heard was Wrestling Court, I think it was called. So on a flight, they got on the plane first, or before Kane. Kane was waiting for one of his buddies, and was in danger of missing the flight. So the Hardy Boys, somebody told them, "Oh, take the first class seats that Kane was supposed to be in," and they're like, "I don't think we should do that." But they're like, "No, go for it." So they did, and then Kane and his buddy eventually got on the flight and had to sit in coach. And if you know Kane, he's like the same size as the Undertaker, basically. He's a fucking massive human being. So afterwards, the other wrestlers, the Boys, got word of this, and so they did Wrestling Court. So the Hardy Boys were brought backstage before all their peers. Undertaker was the judge. Bradshaw was one of like the lawyers or whatever, and they basically got their sentence for pulling this stunt on Kane. But it was like a light. They had to carry somebody's bags all month or something like that. Like, it was easy. It wasn't like, you got to suck this guy's dick or something like that. You know what I mean? It was like very light, but it was the message being sent. Like, you guys are new here. You got to earn your dues, pay your dues. You got to, you don't be sitting in first class in Kane's seat, right? Sort of thing. So I thought that was a really interesting thing. And hearing some of these names that they, that brought me back, holy shit, back to the Attitude Era, just insanity. And then, of course, there was the relationship with Lita, who Matt became romantic with, and they kept it very low key, and he didn't talk about it a lot. But one of the more interesting things on Lita's side of things, they talk about some of the promotions that they did. And one of the promotions was for Lita, and I think it was for like Chef Boyardee or something like that. It was for some sort of food, and I think it was a pasta. And so she had to take, I don't know, she had to do some move, like a high-flying move, but she was supposed to be like roped in or secured, but they didn't have her in that, and they were running out of time. So the guys running the shoot just said, "Oh, just do it without it." And of course, something went wrong, and she hurt her neck. And they were like, "No, you're fine. You do this for a living. Like, I'm sure you get hurt all the time. Like, whatever. Just keep going, right?" Sort of thing. And meanwhile, she's like, "No, like something's fucking seriously wrong." So eventually, they took her to the doctor, and the doctor's like, "Oh my god, like, you need to have this surgery right now, or the rest of your life could be in jeopardy." Like, this guy made it sound to them like, if she gets up out of that chair and takes 3 steps, like, it could be then. Like, she could go down, and but they were like, "Really? Like, she's been walking around like this for a while after she did this. Like, don't you think if that was going to happen, it would have already happened?" So they didn't trust what this guy was saying. So they wanted to talk to a different doctor, and they got in touch with Stone Cold Steve Austin, who had his own neck surgery, and it looked like his career was in jeopardy. And so Stone Cold basically took the whole thing over and says, "Yeah, we'll go see my guy, whatever." So they went, and Stone Cold knew all the questions to ask and blah, blah, blah. And the other doctor was like, that guy didn't know what the fuck he was talking about. Like, this is what we'll do. You're okay. You're not going to walk down the street and suddenly collapse and be paralyzed, right? So really interesting behind the scenes kind of looks at some of these things and stuff that you don't know, right? Like, Who knew Lita blew out her neck on a fucking Chef Boyardee shoot or whatever it is, right? Like, very interesting stuff. These wrestling books are funny because when they're talking about the matches, like I've seen all the matches, some of them I remember, some of them I don't, but you remember what happened in the moment, but you don't know what happened behind the scenes that went into the match, or what happened after the match, if somebody had their nose out of joint, or was something was supposed to happen but didn't. So that's interesting to hear some of those aspects. But then, like I said, this commercial shoot, there's all these other things behind the scenes that you would never know at all. So reading these books, helps to really get a better look at an industry that is just so bizarre in the fact that it's predetermined, but at the same time so dangerous, and so athletic. It's just, but to see what goes on behind the scenes in such a bizarre kind of industry, I find is always a really interesting thing, for me to see or watch or read about or whatever, right? So really enjoyed the book, love the Hardy Boys, and this next book is a fatty. It was I kind of forget the years on it now. I think it was 96. Yeah. So this book was released in 1996 and details the account of probably the most, if not the most famous, one of the most famous regions in the Forgotten Realms realm of stories and lands. And it is called Cormyr. So Cormyr was a land, like I said, in the Forgotten Realms saga. And this book, it was supposed to be a standalone book, but we'll get to that later. It was written to basically detail the history of this land of Cormyr. So at current times, when they're talking about what's actually happening at the time in this book, it's 1396 DR or whatever. So Cormyr has been around for almost a century. No, not a century, a millennium and a half sort of thing, right? It's almost getting close to 1500 years old. And what's going on is the current king of Cormyr is King Azun IV. And he is out on a hunting expedition with his two brothers and a young guy named Anandin Bleth or something like that, a young noble who's actually trying to woo King Azun's eldest daughter and heir to the throne. Her name is Tanalasta. She's a princess, but she's kind of meek and mild-mannered and kind of wimpy and whatever. So they're taking him out on this hunt and, to see what kind of guy he is. And so far they've been pretty impressed. He seems like a stand-up dude who's not afraid of danger and, seems normal, right? Suddenly this monstrosity attacks them. It's like a steel bull or something like that. And it shoots out what seems to be some sort of poison that infects Azun and his two brothers, but not the young Bleth kid. So they are able to send message to get the wizards to come get them. So they're teleported back to Cormyr or Suzail, whatever the capital city is. I think it's Suzail. And to get the healers and the wizards working on these guys, right? But they're stymied. They can't determine what this toxin is. Nothing's working. So over time, one of Azun's brothers dies. And later on, near the end of the story, the next one dies, sort of thing. So basically what goes on in the current times throughout this book is they're trying to save the king and figure out just what the fuck is going on with this, what seems to be an assassination attempt, right? So the guy leading this charge is the King Azun's royal mage, who oh, I had some peanuts in my salad tonight and I think I got the little bits in my throat. So Van Gerdehast is his name, and he's a very powerful mage. And you may remember his name from some of the other books that I've talked about because he's come up before in previous books. So I was very familiar with his character. So every king of Cormyr or whatever has a royal wizard that it kind of rules, doesn't rule alongside him, but advises him and takes care of all the magical side of things. Some people trust this guy, some people don't. He definitely wants what's best for the kingdom, or most people believe that, but sometimes his means don't necessarily make sense to people. So once Azun is lying on his deathbed with this poison, Van Gerdehast has to take matters into his own hand, and he's trying to figure out essentially who sent this machine to kill King Azun. And he gets into it a bit with Princess Tanalasta about, I've got this official document for your mother that should the king go down, I'm going to rule until whatever happens. Everybody thinks it's just a power grab, but Van Gerda has plans within plans within plans that are all unraveling as all of this is going on. And he's meaning to stir up these people to get certain reactions and to instigate certain events to eventually cause the assassin to reveal themselves and then put this whole thing to bed. But the problem is, Azun is actually dying. So they have this clock that they're racing against as well. Like, they've got all this intrigue to unravel, but they've also got to try and save the king because Tanalasta is not ready to take over the throne. And Azun's other daughter, his younger daughter, it starts with an A. Oh shit, I forget her name now. But she's more of a Spitfire, and she loves to battle and fight. So she's out in the Stonelands trying to clear the area of monsters and goblins and shit like that. And she wants no part in ruling the land sort of thing. So the whole what if King Azun dies element is like, oh fuck, like that's going to start a power grab from all the noble families because the younger sister doesn't want to wear the crown. Tanalasta is going to be seen as a weak ruler, so like what the hell is going to go on? So all of what happens in the current times is Van Gerda has schemes to right all of these wrongs and make sure Cormyr comes through this peacefully, reasonably, successfully sort of thing, right? Now, that being said, Cormyr is a chronicle of the history, the whole history of Cormyr. So it bounces back from current times and what's going on to the very beginnings of Cormyr, and then it bounces forward a bit, until it comes right up to current time sort of thing. So the original guy that, well, I guess the lands that Cormyr was settled on initially belonged to the dragons. And there was a big black dragon, Thorgold or something like that his name was, who ruled the land and kept his realm in check. Over time, the elves started to come, and eventually they surpassed the dragons and they became the people of the land. And then eventually, of course, the humans came. And the first guy to come was a guy named Oberskir, who was the first of the Oberskir line, who are the rulers of Cormyr, to settle the land. So he built a little plot for himself and his wife and his kids. And eventually, the first, I guess, considered royal magician for the elves, a magical guy, not an elf, but a human, but a magical guy. He kind of aided the elves, but he reached out to Oberskir and said, okay, you're on the elves' land. Like, they're a little concerned about you moving into their realm and cutting down trees and stuff like that. And the guy's like, hey, like, I gotta go somewhere. And you know what? I'll be cool. Like, what do they want? Like, don't hunt these animals, leave the hunting grounds to them, only settle in this area, treat the forest well, nature is number one in the elves' minds. And the guy's like, hey, no problem. That's great. And then, of course, so they developed an okay relationship. But over time, of course, more humans came. It started to grow. And so that brought them head to head with the elves from time to time. And over time, some of the Oberskir rulers and kings and queens were good. Sometimes they were bad. But overall, that millennium and a half, it grew. The elves were eventually forced out and the humans took over. And that leads us up to the current times of the story that I've just basically detailed for you about King Azun IV and his near-death experience. I say near-death because he did survive. So yeah, I hear about Cormyr so much in these Forgotten Realms books, but they don't necessarily feature into every story, right? There's so many different areas in the Forgotten Realms that not all of them take place in or around Cormyr. But so this was a really cool account to read. Basically, like, this is the Bible for part of the Forgotten Realms universe, right? So it was really neat, a really neat read. And I really like the bouncing back and forth between, because you kind of put pieces together and you see, oh, that guy descended from that guy. So that's how the royal magician line started and continued. Like, really neat story. I really enjoyed it. And I'm glad they turned it into a trilogy. More on that next, because the next book up is called Beyond the High Road, the follow-up to Cormyr. And this was 98. Ooh, glasses up. No, sorry, 99, 3 years later. So you can see there's 3 years between the books. So obviously this wasn't meant to be a fast-hitting trilogy when it was first written. So, but they decided to keep it going. And a different author for this one too, Troy Denning, who I've read tons of Troy Denning books because he writes in that massive Star Wars expanded universe that I have back there. He's got a lot of books in there, plus some other ones as well. So in this book, it takes place, I think, not too long after Cormyr, a handful of months, I think. And after the events of the last book, King Azun recovered and the kingdom's back to normal. Princess Tanalasta, oh, sorry, one of the main things was the main conspirator in the assassination attempt against King Azun IV was Anandar Bleth, the guy that was trying to betroth Azun's daughter, Princess Tanalasta. So he got, yeah, I think he died. I think they killed him in the end. And then so all of the noble families that were in on this assassination attempt were basically blacklisted and stripped of things and, you know, punished, sort of thing, right? So so Tanalasta, to start this story, she's been away for several months off in another area of the realm, working for the priests of Chante. Chante is one of the gods, like kind of a nature thing, I think. And she went out there to kind of escape the palace and the kingdom and kind of come to terms with how she fell for Bleth's kind of bullshit and how she seemed so meek and mild-mannered and kind of wimpy during that whole emergency when Azun was almost killed. So she comes back several months later, a much different person. She has worked the land out in nature. She has a new appreciation for nature in the realm and for life in general. And she comes back to the realm and her parents are excited. Philforil, her mother, and Azun, her father. And it's King Azun's birthday. So everybody's gathering and giving him presents, blah, blah, blah. And she gives him these plants that the priests of this Temple of Chante or whatever that come back with her are able to put magic on, and suddenly these trees and plants just bloom out of thin air in these pots, and then they eventually die. And her father's like, "Whoa, what am I supposed to do with this?" And she's like, "This is just symbolic." She's like, "We're gonna put a royal temple to Chante here in Suzail." And that gets everybody all stirred up because there's no temples in this town. There's no religion things. Like, the crown is what rules this place, and there's no, you know, if you want to be devoted to this or that, that's fine, but there's no churches, temples, whatever. Like, it's religion free sort of thing. So her parents are at odds with her again about that, and so is Van Gerdehast, of course, because he sees that as, oh, if all these other things come in, then that weakens the royal mage and the war wizard's position within the kingdom, right? So there's all of this concern going on about what Tanalasta has brought, right? But the bigger problem is that when Tanalasta and her devoted Chante servants were on their way back to Suzail, they noticed this blight across the land. Crops are growing this white mold on them. Things are not going well out in the growing areas of the realm, and it's starting in the north and it's working its way down. So they're trying to get to the bottom of this. Eventually, it comes out that there was a guy long time ago who came out with these prophecies, and one of them was something about the wrath of the seven or the scourge of the seven or something like that. And I can't remember exactly how it went, but eventually it is revealed that these monsters called Van Gerdehast runs into one, and he can't kill it. He can barely escape it. And he's like, what the hell is that thing? And the thing calls itself a Gazneth. And he's like, I don't know what this creature is. I have no reference to it. I couldn't defeat it with any of my magic. Like, what the fuck is this, right? So eventually, I can't remember how it all unfolds, but they learn that these, one of the relatives of the people that were in on the assassination attempt to kill the king. One of the families that was involved in that, one of the cousins or whatever, was pissed off that his family was blackballed or whatever. So he's like, I'm going to cause Cormyr a real problem. You thought just assassinating the king was something? Hold my beer, right? So he somehow finds the graves of some of Cormyr's biggest traitors, some of its rulers over the years, that betrayed the kingdom for various reasons and in various means, and animated them into these these gaznests. Like they're almost like insectile. They have wings on their back that can fly really fast, and they can basically decapitate people at will. Like they're terrifying enemies. And nobody knows how to fight them. So this guy has riled them up, and they're the ones that are causing this blight across the land. So King Azun eventually goes out into the field to try and combat them. He runs into his youngest daughter, who was out in the Stonelands, like I said, killing goblins and shit, and she gets in on the action as well, but nobody knows how to kill these things. And then the book eventually ends kind of on a cliffhanger. They haven't managed to kill any of these Gazneths, and they're kind of at a crossroads of what to do. So Tanalasta also went out in the field to try and address this problem and the blights on the farmlands and whatever. And along the way, and she also went out searching for her sister, because her sister had kind of gone off the radar to magic, and people feared that, oh, is she dead? So she eventually meets up with her sister, and one of her sister's rangers or whatever, his name is Rowan Cormyr, who was one of the blackballed families from the assassination attempt. Tanalasta doesn't want to take the throne and marry a guy just to make a good match and make sure the kingdom lives on. She had a vision about marrying and becoming the queen out of love. And she meets this Rowan Cormyr guy in Tanalasta, or in her sister's camp, and immediately the two are like enamored with each other, and eventually they do secretly marry, they have sex, and it turns out she gets pregnant. More on that later, maybe on the next book, which I haven't finished reading yet, but spoiler alert, that's coming next round. And so at the end of the book, they're at a cliff, kind of a crossroads on what to do with this Gazneth problem, and where to go, and how to approach everything. So I can't remember what the girls do, but basically they send Rowan on a horse back to the kingdom to report on what has happened, while the rest of them go on to do whatever they're going to do, and Van Gurdehast goes to do whatever he's going to do. They all kind of part ways right at the end of the book. It's kind of like an Empire Strikes Back ending. Like everything's fucking up in the air, and it's not looking really good for the good guys, right? And that's kind of where the book ends. I can't remember the exact details of everything, because I've read so many books lately, and I'm old, and I forget things a minute after they happen. So the fact that I remembered that much, I'm pretty happy about. But you know, I've read some reviews on these books, and there's a lot of mixed reviews along the way. Some people have said, you know, it was okay, but I felt like there was something missing, blah, blah, blah. I fucking love both of these books, like where this whole series has gone. I found the action intense, fast-paced, cool enemies, real big problems, not just violent, physical, gotta face our enemy, but like within the court, and like intrigue and betrayal and assassination, and you know, that kind of thing, right? These stories kind of have it all, and yeah, I've enjoyed them greatly. So there you go. Next up, what year was this one from? I was so looking forward to this one, and it did not disappoint. This was 2000 something. What the hell? Once again, glasses up. I can't see. (2024) it looks like. Yeah, it's more recent. And this one is called Macho Man, The Untamed, Unbelievable Life of Randy Savage. Macho Man, one of my favorite wrestlers of all time. You know, my Mount Rushmore of wrestling is Macho Man, Undertaker, Rock, Triple H. Those are my big four. There's lots of other guys that are close, you know, nipping at their heels, but those are my favorite four. Like, those are the four guys, my ride or dies, so to speak. And the Macho Man, of course, was the original of those because he was the earliest. And the story starts off with some information on how his parents met and whatever, and but focuses mostly on his dad because his dad, Angelo Poffo, was a wrestler. It starts off with Angelo in the Navy when he goes to set a sit-up record. He already tried to beat it once, got 5,000 plus, but he was disqualified because he didn't use the right form. So he goes to do it again. Most people would say, fuck it. I did it. I know I did it. Whatever. He goes again. Gets 6,033 sit-ups. And I'm not talking like over the span of a day and having a bit of a rest or whatever. No, like you got to bang them out all in a row. It took like 4 hours or something like that. He was bleeding from the abdomen, sweating profusely. The doctors were concerned because they said people have died trying to do this before, right? So right there you get a bit of an insight into the work ethic and determination of the Poffo family, right? So then it talks about, you know, his parents meeting and then his dad going across the territories, wrestling, hardly being able to afford anything. And so the guy was so cheap, you know what I mean? Like all these money saving things he would do. I forget the specifics of them, but I laughed when I heard some of them. And eventually they had a couple of kids. Lanny, the older brother, if you remember mid to late 80s wrestling, you would remember Leapin' Lanny Poffo. Well, that's Randy Savage's brother right there. And then after Lanny came Randy Poffo. Randy and Lanny loved to go watch their dad wrestle. At first, as young kids, they didn't get, like, when he went out because he was a heel. They're like, why are they booing Daddy? Like, Daddy's great. Why do they not like Daddy? So it took them a while to be like, oh, Daddy wants that to happen. Like, that's good for him, right? Like, this is a show kind of thing, right? So it was interesting to hear this kind of little kid's take on, you know, their dad being a professional wrestler, right? And so eventually Lanny got right into the wrestling biz with his dad, but Randy got the baseball bug and he got it bad. And he was so determined to make the major leagues and be the best player he could be. You won't believe some of the things that he did. Like, they did move around a lot. They lived in Hawaii for a year, but it was very transitory. Eventually they decided when the kids reached a certain age, like, we got to settle down and give them a stable life. So they settled in Downers Grove, Illinois, and Randy started playing minor league ball there, like house league ball, and eventually he got to the minor leagues and stuff as a catcher. And he was so determined to be a player nobody could resist that he taught himself how to switch hit, and he actually had more power from his opposite side, his left side, than he did from the right. His average wasn't as good on the left, but he had more power. So it was very interesting to hear this stuff. And then eventually he got a shoulder injury on his throwing arm in the minors, went out behind like a 7-Eleven or something it was, and threw like 1,000 balls a day with his left hand against the wall to eventually teach himself to throw with his left hand. And when you hear the stories from his teammates and you read the press clippings and stuff, like, he was the top ranked catcher, I think, in all of Illinois when he came out of high school or came out of the minors, ready to be drafted. And they even built a batting cage. Like, the Poffo household sounded awesome. It had a pool, it had a wrestling ring and a weight room in the basement. And then they eventually built a batting cage along the side of the house so they could hit balls all year long, even in the winter sort of thing. So, and you could just hear Randy out there apparently like constantly, right, sort of thing. So the guy was just determined. Draft day came. Round 1 went by. He didn't get picked. Disappointed, but hey, there's lots of other rounds. All the other rounds went. Didn't get selected. 60 catchers were picked during that draft. He was not one of them. So he was like devastated, but kept going. Walked on with, I think, the Reds or the Cardinals. I can't remember. Got a contract. Bounced around, but like I said, injured himself, whatever. And eventually he just couldn't make it. So he quit. And not because he quit, he had to, like, nobody wanted him, sort of thing. So then eventually he said, like, going to be a wrestler like Daddy and brother, right? So then he got into wrestling, and at first he was, Macho Man wasn't that big. He was like 6'1", 235 or something like that at his like peak height or peak size, I think. So he wasn't a big dude compared to monsters like Hulk Hogan and Big John Studd and Andre the Giant, these guys, right? But he had that big presence, but not at first. He was just a regular dude at first. And then he realized he needed something to make him stand apart. Now he hustled and he had great moves and he could sell matches. And guys said like he would land that vicious looking top rope elbow on you and you didn't feel a damn thing. He was that good. Like this guy knew how to wrestle. He knew the business. So I think it was his mom was talking about an upcoming Village People single. I think it was Macho Man. She was talking about that with Randy, and Randy was like, Macho Man, huh? So then he started toying with new names for himself. So then Macho Man became part of it, and then Randy Savage, and then Macho Man Randy Savage, and then he started The Voice, and then Macho Man was born, and then he started really working out and getting himself his best shape as possible, and then he started with all the experimenting with all the costumes, and eventually it all morphed into the Macho Man that we all knew and loved from the mid to late 80s, when he was just this neon cowboy hat, tassels, sunglasses, oh yeah, like you couldn't take your eyes off this guy. He was so mesmerizing. And reading through the book, it sounded like he didn't hardly ever turn it off. Maybe when he was at home with only his family, but when he's out on the street talking to people, or he's going to an airport to go somewhere, he's in his stuff, he's talking like he did, like he just didn't turn it off. And that was another side of him, is that he was dedicated, but he was also intense as hell. And so eventually he met Elizabeth, who became his manager / valet in WWE, or WWF at the time, much better. And she was like the new front desk girl at the gym he went to at the time, and instantly the two were like, oh. So they started going out, eventually got married, and she went to the WWE with him when he eventually signed and became his manager. But he was so intense that the blur between reality and the wrestling stories, for him, there sometimes wasn't one. So he would sometimes get jealous, like if somebody carried Elizabeth out of the ring, he's like, whoa, where did you touch her? And so people loved the Macho Man. He was a great competitor, an amazing wrestler, and a good guy, but they said he had this side of him that made it kind of hard to deal with him at times, right? Because of this jealousy and this intensity and stuff like that. So it was just, and then they went through all of the sequence of events that led to him winning like his first Intercontinental title against Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, which is one of the most infamous matches of all time, and up to winning the heavyweight championship against Hulk Hogan, and then his experience with the Ultimate Warrior and all this stuff. So they go through the whole history of it, and then how Elizabeth came in and out of things then, and then when he became the Macho King and got rid of Elizabeth, and then Sherry came in to manage him, and then when he eventually jumped to WCW. So I can't remember, he either got hurt or something like that, and then went, or he got burned out or something happened, and he went on the commentary booth, and he became even more famous there from his commentary. And like the guy couldn't do any wrong. But eventually, like after a year of doing that, he was like, okay, I'm ready to get back in the ring. And he fleshed out, there was a new guy coming in named Shawn Michaels. And the Heartbreak Kid, everybody knows Shawn Michaels. And so Savage was like, you know what, this guy is more like me, like hustle, speed, intensity, smaller in size. Like I could have a real good match with this guy. Yeah. And so he proposed this match, like I could come back against Shawn Michaels and we could have this epic match that would kind of be and I'll lose. I'll put him over. I'll make Shawn awesome. And it would kind of be like a passing of the torch from the Macho to Shawn Michaels. And Vince and the WWE shot him down because they were in the beginning phases of phasing in the Attitude Era, what became the Attitude Era with a youth movement. And they said, sorry, Mach, it's not going to happen. So that disgruntled him and eventually caused him to part ways with WWF and go over to WCW. where he became eventually part of the NWO, more of a bad guy, and eventually it got into how him and Elizabeth started having problems. They eventually got divorced, sort of thing. But then she would eventually come back for some things and whatever before she died in 2003. And then after his wrestling days were kind of over, it goes through some of the promotional things he did, like the Slim Jim promotion, which the marketing guy from Slim Jim said, like, you know, we were a struggling company, whatever. We got this deal with Macho Man instantly, like within a couple of years, like we were making hundreds of millions or whatever, like, and everybody knew us, you know what I mean? Like, that was the power of the Macho Man, right? And then of course it got into some of his charity work, like a lot of these things that people didn't know. He would do like this Christmas reading every year for George Steinbrenner from the Yankees charity and stuff like that. So he loved kids. You know, people thought, oh, Macho wouldn't be good with kids, but just the opposite, right? Like, he was a really interesting guy in every aspect, right? And eventually, one of the last things it talked about was his appearance in the original Spider-Man movie with Tobey Maguire and Bonesaw McGraw, or whatever his name was, and how, you know, the people on the set, of course, knew about him but didn't know what to expect. And then they talked about, like, the guy, he came to work, he put in the effort, he was so nice, he stunt double, fuck that shit, he's doing all my own shit, you know, like, he just, like, everybody just was amazed by this guy, right? It was such an interesting story, every part of it. And then of course it ends with when he died, and I can't remember how he died, and it was actually, I think, was it 2011 or something like that? It was early 2010s. And to me, it seems longer ago than that. I feel like we've been missing Macho Man for 30 years, not only, you know, not 15 or whatever. Feels like he's been gone forever, because he's such a big presence. To finally have that snuffed out, you know, that's a big hole for people that grew up loving this guy, right? In all of the phases of his career, right? So, he hadn't been feeling well, and they were out for breakfast one morning, him and his new wife at the time, I forget her name, down in Florida where he lived, and they were leaving a restaurant, and he was like, I don't feel well, and she's like, you want me to drive? And he's like, no. So then he had a heart attack behind the wheel, and his wife had to, like, basically save them and other drivers on the road by basically jerking the wheel and crashing them into a tree to stop them from doing any damage to anybody else. So fortunately, she was only minor injuries, but Macho, unfortunately, was dead. And the author of the book, it was a cool little ending, because he said, you know, I put so much of my life into this, being a huge Macho Man fan growing up, and I wanted to do this book for so long. He said, apparently this tree where Macho crashed, people pay tribute to it all the time. Like, it's become an infamous tree. There's always, like, there's Slim Jim wrappers taped to it. There's, like, tassels tied around it. There's little wrestling figures on the bait. Like, it's just, people go pay respect to this tree even all these years later. Like 2024, this was written, right? Like, so he took his daughter to go to the tree and visit it, and his daughter was like, it's just a tree. Like, what, people care about a tree just because he crashed into it? And lo and behold, they drive up and it's just decorated with shit. And his daughter was like, oh, I guess this guy really was important, kind of thing. Like, it was just a cool moment to hear the author's kind of take on this moment in time with his own child, right? And passing on his own love of the Macho Man and wrestling, you know, to his kids. And he said that his son watched every match with him when he was kind of researching these moments from Macho Man's career, right? So what a cool thing to do, be an author and, you know, get to interview his brother and all these people that he wrestled with and played ball with and whatever. And it's actually it's sad, but it's interesting that this guy didn't want to write the book unless Lanny, Randy's brother, was okay with it. So he talked to Lanny and they got along right away. And he's like, yeah, go for it. But then Lanny died, I can't remember, a number of months before the book was finished or was released or something like that. So kind of sad too that, you know, Lanny didn't even get to pick up a copy and read it and put it on his shelf, right? But fuck, that's life these days, right? Bunch of bullshit. But awesome book. You know, 4 really good books there. One of my favorite wrestlers of all time, one of my favorite tag teams of all time. Really, really amazing athletes and wrestlers, and just very interesting people. And I forgot like Jeff Hardy of the Hardy Boys. Like Matt was the more straightforward guy. Jeff was very artistic and also liked to write music and build these little statues. So they eventually both built properties on their dad's land and stayed close to home, close to their roots as they got later on into their career, sort of thing. And so, which was kind of fun to see. But and then those two books in the Cormyr trilogy, like I said, were both so entertaining in so many ways. Like these 4 books were just like big books, but I just banged right through them because, you know, when you pick up a good book, it just melts away in your hands like a fucking M&M, right? Last up, the only video game on this list today, I forget what year it was from, 2022 or 18 or 19? I can't remember. Look it up. It is a little, I think, independent production that I downloaded on my PS5, and it is called Raw Boom. The story behind Raw Boom is that Earth has been taken over by an AI named Zoe. And so this creature has taken over the Earth and programmed all these little bots to like decimate humanity and stuff. So humanity has actually fled to the skies. They live in these like little pods that hover in space, where they go about their weird life now up in the stars. So the game focuses on these 4 young girls who attend school and are cheerleaders and are the Earthlings' hope against Zoe. So every day they go to school and they learn the history of the takeover of Earth by Zoe and all that kind of stuff. But they're being trained to combat the AI resistance by their teacher. Oh fuck, Z, I think her name is. No, Zen or something like that. I can't remember her name. But so there's 9 stages in the game, and the first stage is basically a tutorial / training level where this person that trains you kind of walks you through the basic controls of the game and stuff like that. And then the other 8 stages chronicle your adventures fighting off the forces of Zoe after your training facility gets attacked by some of their bots. So you're kind of on the run, and then eventually you end up on Earth. And of course, the last boss fight of the game is against Zoe himself, where you attempt to put down this AI resistance for good and hopefully win back your Earth, right? Very neat game, very, very different in some respects. So the screen is divided up into these basically horizontal lanes, and they talk about it a lot in the game, like stay in your lane. When the enemy's in this lane, you got to be in that lane too to hit it, and if they're going to hit you, you just move to another lane kind of thing. It's not like you just pop up and, you know, you can move all over the screen fluidly however you want, but there are these markers on the screen that show you where these lanes are so you can line up your enemies, which was an interesting concept. I mean, you do that in your mind anyway, even without there, you got to line it up, but this just gives you that visual cue for it kind of thing, right? So then, yeah, you essentially go through these 9 stages. There's always a boss at the end of each stage. And the bosses are usually more difficult. The stages themselves usually aren't that hard. But when you get to the boss, most of the time they can be pretty difficult. And like I said, there's 4 girls that you have access to. There's Eris, who is the leader, V, Ren, and Saiga or something like that. I forget her name. Yeah, I totally forget her name. And what I like about this game, well, there's many things I like about this game, but one of the things I like is all 4 characters are very different. They're different in the speed that each character contains. One of them has a shield, the other ones don't. You know, their ranged weapons fire at different rates and with different amounts of force and power behind them. So each character has a very unique set of skills specific to just themselves. So you have to learn each character's kind of strengths and weaknesses as you play through the game, which I thought is really neat, because some games it's just like, oh yeah, you got these 4 different characters you can choose from, and they look different, but everything about them is the same, right? They move at the same speed, they jump the same height, they shoot the same bullets, they take the same amount of damage, you know. So this game was really cool in that it made that differentiation between each character's abilities. I really thought that was neat. And then yeah, so you make your way through these 9 stages. There are health pickups you can get when you get damaged. You can pick up these little heart canisters that will fill you up to various degrees. And the only other thing to collect other than health is scrap. So anytime you destroy one of Zoi's little robot creations, they'll leave some amount of scrap metal lying around. Make sure to collect it. You don't have to be really that dedicated to collecting it, because what you do is you spend your scrap on upgrading various abilities of the girls. And now once you apply that upgrade, it applies to all 4. You don't have to do them individually. So there's things specific to your blaster, like your rate of fire, your damage, that sort of thing. There's stuff related to your melee capability, and then there's stuff related to your person, like how much health you have, how much damage costs you, sort of thing. And then there's other skills you can unlock, like the ability to double jump and then hover and stuff like that. So there's tons of things you can unlock. But like I said, you get enough scrap early on in the game to have them all maxed before you get to the later stages of the game where it's going to get really tough, right? Now, I guess that being said, that brings one other element of this game into play. If you simply want to run through each level and just beat it basically to get to the next one and go that way, then you may have to be a little more vigilant in collecting scrap, because each level, if you want to beat it in completion, like in total completion, you need to beat it 4 times. So essentially there's a homework assignment on each level. There's 4 homework assignments you can do on each level, and they're always the same. So the first homework assignment is simply just beat the level any way, any means possible. The second one is beat the level using only your melee attack. That one's a little trickier, but your melee does a lot more damage than your ranged weapon. So even though you're more liable to take more damage up close and personal like that, you also kill enemies a lot faster. So it's kind of a wash, you know? And then the third homework assignment, you may have guessed, is defeat the level only using your ranged weapon. Easier to accomplish, but longer to accomplish, because your ranged weapon, like I said, is less powerful. So it takes just longer to kill the enemies, sort of thing, right? And then the last homework assignment is just defeat the level against harder enemies. Depending on the level, some of the levels it seemed like the enemies on that were actually easier, and other levels seemed like they were harder. So it was a really weird homework assignment in some respects. But I made it through the game and got all 4 homework assignments on all 9 stages. So that was all good. But yeah, I went through and beat each level 4 times at the time. So I built up my scrap really quick. So by the time I got even halfway through the game, I was maxed and ready to take on those later levels, right? But if you are going through just beating the first one to speed through the game, then yeah, you'd need to be a little more vigilant. So that too, I thought was a very interesting aspect of the game, these various homework assignments. And now, in case you want to play this game, one hint is that, so you have your melee weapon. Each character has a melee weapon. They have a ranged weapon, and you also have a special weapon. So when you do a set amount of damage to the enemies, your special gauge will fill, and then you can press circle to unleash a wave of energy that really does high damage on regular enemies and bosses. That special weapon can be used on all homework assignments. It doesn't count as a ranged weapon. It doesn't count as a melee weapon. So if you're trying to get just the melee weapon, feel free to use your special. It won't cancel that out. And likewise with your ranged stipulation, it's safe to use at any time, which is nice because, like I said, it's a potent fucking weapon. So yeah, really great game. I got it really cheap on sale. I've seen it in a lot of videos. That's how I discovered it. A lot of like people's top run and gun side-scrolling games. It's on a lot of these lists, so that's why it came into my consciousness. And when I looked it up, it was on sale. I was like, boom, let's do this. Highly worth it. Even at full price, I'd say that game is worth it, because you can get a lot of replay out of it with all the different homework assignments, right? And when the game ended, it ended on a bit of a cliffhanger. So I'm guessing we might be seeing a rah-rah boom boom at some point in the future. Fingers crossed. Peace.
Meow.